Hi, we're back. We're live. Think Tech Talks here on a Monday morning, relatively early, in Community Matters. That's a double entendre. It's not only Community Matters, it's Community Matters. Did I do that right? With Dr. Pete Britos, Professor of Media and the Director of the Media and
Cinematic
Arts Department program at Hawaii Pacific University. We've been collaborating with Pete for a long time. And we're calling this show Hawaii Pacific News at HPU because there is a Hawaii Pacific News, and Pete runs that as part of his classes in the program. And we want to talk to him about all of those things. So Pete, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Now, this program has been going on for a while that I know, at least a few years. What's its origins and what's its depth and breadth?
Well, it's part of the Media and Cinematic Arts program at HPU, the Hawaii Pacific News. And it started in a class that we run called Writing for New Media. And it's interesting, sometimes students, they're a bit hesitant because they're perhaps not necessarily interested in typing out words, which is what writing connotes. But the way that we look at writing for media is that we use it as a metaphor. So if you're shooting films and video, or you're doing audio recordings, or you're doing animation, those are forms of writing. So writing for new media is a bit ambiguous, and perhaps rightfully so. New media can be whatever's new at that particular time. So this is the kind of course that constantly updates its technology.
A moving target.
It's a moving target, exactly. So students come in, and part of the course is set on traditional media, and some of it includes the stuff that's just coming up through the pipeline. So we've been doing the Writing for New Media Hawaii Pacific News for the past 4 or 5 years. And what it entails in part is that students come in and we really take seriously the writing component of creating media. There is reality television that is loosely scripted, but in general, if you want to have a halfway decent product, you have writers involved because you need a blueprint, you need a template. That's the way that you can do complex collaborative endeavors.
Yeah.
So you get a script, and then you go forward. So we write or we create media in several different kinds of genres. For example, we have a HPN, Hawaii Pacific News television magazine show. And from the very beginning of the semester, the students know that part of their job this semester is to conceptualize, to write, to produce, and to edit television magazine shows. And as you know, the television magazine show gets that name in part from the magazine template. If you open up to the table of contents of the magazine, you have various kinds of articles that you're going to go take a look at, and then you can shuffle through them. So usually what happens is we do like a half-hour show, but that will entail at least 3 or 4 different segments. And so students will conceptualize, they'll say what they want to do. Because that's part of it.
It's a moving company.
It's like or 60 Minutes or 2020 or Inside Edition. There's a genre for this kind
or
of
Think Tech
production.
on OC16.
Or Think Tech on OC16, absolutely, which is why we kind of fit nicely together. And the students really appreciate having that kind of a venue. So one of the nice things about where we're at technologically today is that you don't need permission in order to publish. So technically, our students can go out there and publish their own stuff endlessly, or the program that we're doing, we can publish the stuff online. But television still is the killer app of our time. So it's nice to be able to have a pipeline to a organization like Think Tech, where the work that the students do that they're going to publish online can also make its way to the television, cable, or broadcast.
I can't resist a digression on that issue. Think Tech and had radio, live radio for a long time. And we concluded that this year. We're at the end of 2013. And we have television in the form of OC16 and Olelo Community Television. We have, like about 6, almost 10 hours a week on television. But I'm wondering where you think the internet fits. Because that's the big question, It's like the crystal ball question. Mm-hmm. Nobody is better qualified to answer that question. Where is it? When is it going to, surface as the, leading way of delivery?
Well, it is surfacing, and if nothing else, the internet or online is an archival repository for all kinds of content throughout the ages. In 2001, I was working at Clear Channel Communications in Burbank, Los Angeles, at the Clear Channel. I was working for a guy by the name of Rick Dees, pretty famous radio guy, morning DJ for years and years, for decades in Los Angeles, and also the host of the most listened to radio show in the world, the Rick Dees Weekly Top 40. Anyway, when 9/11 hit, it was really instructive to me. It was, massive tragedy. All media outlets were covering it if they could. Where we were, the way that radio covered it, the way that we covered it on our show, was that we rolled in television sets into the radio studio so that the radio DJs who are reporting to people in their cars or at home, that they can report in real time what was happening. Super instructive, because there was a time when radio was at the forefront of media. Those were the first responders, people out there with microphones. But all of a sudden, television and the access to video recordings, what have you, superseded that kind of easy technology.
That's really too bad, in a sense.
Well, I don't know if it's too bad, but radio hasn't died. I mean,
it's different. That's all.
It's different, and I'll give you an example. When the internet started to take off in the 90s and the 2000s, one of the early adopters of this new technology was audio. Audio, because it is easy to stream. It wasn't like video, which was like, pushing the elephant through the straw. So audio has survived. In fact, maybe what we want to do is kind of shift our terminology a little bit from radio, which connotes a little box, wireless and all that, to audio, because audio is still strong.
Yeah.
And what you have online is audio. So as a repository.
You're being streamed on audio now,
Oh,
right.
well,
Yes,
fantastic. There you go. Easy, right? Not as difficult as hooking up all the videos and pushing that.
Well, you got that too.
You got that. Yeah. So I mean, we're in that age where the online is this central repository, and really we're seeing television and online kind of merging together.
I got to tell you a story that comes to mind. Zaps Latiper. He has been a trustee of the Campbell Estate, but before that, he was a many-starred admiral. Okay, in the first Gulf War, he commanded one of the ships in the Gulf. And every morning, the captains of all these ships would meet on the big mothership and have a strategy session, okay? And so before he left, he went down to Radio Shack, and he bought himself a $1.99 dish. And he painted it navy gray, put it on the fantail of his ship. And then in the Gulf, he turned it on, and he got TV by way of CNN. Deborah Wan, I don't know if you remember that name. She was my star reporter then. And he got all the news from CNN. Then we'd get in a launch, go to the mothership, see all the other admirals, and he would know more than anybody there.
That's amazing.
More than the Navy itself knew about its own operation. He knew from CNN.
Well, this is like, Facebook or Twitter today, right? That, a lot of our information isn't coming from the traditional news organization, the trusted journalists, the filters of our information. It's coming from our friends and family that heard it in some other news source and are broadcasting it to their networks. There's all kinds of examples of that where students will come in and, where did you get that information about this, topic? And it's like, well, I, saw it on Facebook this morning before I came in. So it's changing.
Impressive.
The way that we're getting stuff is changing.
Yeah, well, another digression that comes to mind, and that is the thing about writing. Garrison Keillor was here one time, and I was with Hawaii Public Radio, so I got to say hi. And I noticed that he trekked around with like 3 people who had laptops, and they were writing all the time. Everything the man said was being written and rewritten and rewritten. I'm sure it's that way today. And that's all he did. He was developing content. The delivery was actually pretty easy, but he had the words. He had a teleprompter, whatever he had to read the copy. And I said, this is really important to know, that the guy's success was based on his ability to generate good copy himself and with other people helping him. That's his success.
This is one of the things that we cover in depth in our class. You can learn information anywhere, but school is a good place to go get information because you can get it in a really condensed amount of time. We teach interviewing. Now, we didn't really prepare anything, but we've been talking story for quite a while, for years.
Yes.
So we're picking up some threads. But there is a way to do interviews. And I learned this from Quincy Jones and David Salzman. I produced on a show at Columbia TriStar, CBS Television City, called Vibe, an offshoot from the Vibe magazine, music and that kind of thing. But anyway, it was a late night talk show, and it was instructive. You don't know these things sometimes unless you're in the environment, but the way that people look glib and able and intelligent and facile oftentimes is that what they are saying is prepared. It may not be in front of them, but oftentimes you have a producer behind the scenes that is doing research. They're doing pre-interviews on the telephone, going through the possible stories that a guest may be able to tap into, and then they'll write all that stuff down. And then they'll sift through all that material, find the good stories, and they'll stack it. And then they will present it to the host, and they will present it to the guest when the guest comes in, and they'll go to the guest and they'll say, hey, listen, we got these 6 or 8 stories here, and I thought these were fantastic, and we'll probably start off with something like this first, and we'll go here, 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 and then we'll end something like this, because that'll be a good way to end. But it's all prepared. And then folks go out and they sit down and they look really intelligent and like they have their stuff together and they could do this all day. But in some ways it's kind of fabricated. The narrative is prepared or pre-prepared so that folks won't look like there's big empty spots and they're searching for things to say, but it's all right there. So we teach that. And the very first thing that we do, for example, is we have the students interview each other. So you have to go and you have to do a little research.
I want to be in your class.
You got to do your research. You have to talk story. You have to pre-interview them.
Yeah.
And then as a producer and a writer, because here's the big difference between film and television and radio. In film, a producer is doing business. They're making deals, they're getting money, they're putting things in place. In television, a writer is a producer and a producer is a writer. So the producer-writer then goes and they talk story with their friends and they take notes, and then it's the producer's responsibility to stack and line up these stories and to present it to the person they're going to interview and say, hey, I thought these were great and this is where we're going to go. And then they go and do the story. And you don't have any lag time. And then from that basis of doing it with a friend in a low impact kind of environment, well, then you decide on the story that you want to do out in the world. You do something that you want to do, something that interests you, and you go out and you interview people and you prepare and you pre-interview and you do all those kinds of things and you come out with a show at the end of it.
Yeah. And in the meantime, what you're doing is creating intellectual property. You're creating thoughts you wouldn't have had. You're touching things that you wouldn't touch. You're bringing value to whoever is watching or listening.
And ultimately, that's a super important point. And one of the things that we've done structurally at HPU is we've codified the importance of this intellectual property. For example, we have a intellectual property certification form that the students will sign off on some of our production courses that essentially give ownership of what they are going to create to the students themselves. Now, what that creates is a learning environment where the students understand and realize that this is their stuff. It's not the university's, but it's theirs. If they do a good job, it's their intellectual property. If you want a post-production life for what you've produced, well, you do a good job. Compete. And so students are doing that work with the understanding and the knowledge that they own this intellectual property. They're the legit director, writer, producers, and it's kind of all on them.
Yeah, and
It
you
makes
raise
them
their
engaged.
awareness that there really is there's a property that they're working on,
And
not
if-
just going out into space.
That's right. And if you do it here, you can apply that process to anything else you do in your own life.
Yeah.
So, part of it is just going through the workflow, right? That's part of what we teach.
Yeah.
I like you have a quote outside next door from Albert Einstein. And he says something to the effect of, I don't teach my pupils. I set up an environment where they can learn. and so much of learning is self-learning, right? So there's only so much you can have kind of this hypodermic needle put into somebody's head, and the real learning happens when somebody understands, embraces a workflow, and can take a project from A to Z, right?
That's Pete Britos, Dr. Pete Britos, professor of media and director of the Media and Cinematic Arts program at HPU. We're talking about Hawaii Pacific News at HPU here on Think Tech Talks, Community Matters. And I hope you're taking notes because this is good. We'll be right back.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions. I'm Nicole Hori. Thanks so much for joining us on Think Tech. I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
We're back. We're live. We're here with Dr. Pete Britos, professor of media and director of the Media and Cinematics Art program at HPU. We're talking about that program. We're talking about Hawaii Pacific News, which is part of that program here on Think Tech Talks. So, now, there's some very interesting stuff coming up in this discussion, and we're not using a teleprompter. This is totally free form. But who would take a class like this, the class you're offering in cinematic arts and media, and why?
Well, some students have to take it as part of their requirement, but it tends to be a pretty transdisciplinary group. I'll give you an example. In the Media and Cinematic Arts program, we have 2 baccalaureate degree programs. One is integrated multimedia, graphic designers, web designers, publishers, and then we have the multimedia cinematic production baccalaureate degree, which is people that are interested in cinematic narrative animation, those kinds of things. So those kinds of students
lots of choices here. There's lots of categories that you can fit into.
Exactly.
This is not just one size fits all. It's a whole panoply of things.
Well, and not only that, but we have ad PR students, strategic communication students, journalism students. So all of these students need to be versatile in the media arts, in part because if you're going to get a job at one of the TV stations or at one of the newspapers or a magazine, they don't want you to just write anymore. They don't want you to just take pictures anymore. They don't want you to just do video. That used to be the way it was, really segregated positions. But now, when they hire an individual, they want somebody that can write, set up the template. They want them to be able to shoot photographs. They want them to be able to shoot video. They want them to appear on camera. They want them to be able to publish that stuff online.
I hope they pay for all that.
Well, there's fewer and fewer people getting paid, but you need those kinds of skills in order to compete in the workforce.
Yes.
So we get these kinds of students that have these kinds of aspirations. The ability to write and publish in multiple formats.
So you get them, and they don't have a lot of experience necessarily. What product are you trying to deliver? I mean, from the beginning of the class, the whole program till the end. What are you trying to shape in that student, and what kind of product do you want to have at the end of the class?
Well, it is writing for new media. So writing is paramount, and I believe strongly in that. If you want to, collaborate with folks, you need to have something that you can all sit around and look at and tear apart and fix and all that kind of stuff. So we want folks that embrace that when they begin, you need to be able to write. But then you need to be able to put your ideas into motion. You need to gather assets. Assets can be photographs, assets can be video, it can be audio, and you need some other tools. For example, we do green screen. We have a small shoebox green screen studio, and we make the students get in there, and we make them get in front of the camera and behind the camera. You have to be able to empathize with your talent. So folks that don't necessarily want to be in the talent position, sitting there in front of a camera, we make them get in front of a camera. Those that want to be in front of the camera, we also make them get behind the camera, hold boom mics, shoot video, go through all of those processes. So it's a lot of multitasking.
So interesting, in the law practice, when you bring an associate in, he says, well, I don't want to do litigation. They all say that, most of them anyway. And you say, no, you can't write a document, okay, that can be tested in court unless you see the experience of testing it in court.
Yeah.
And then there's the guys who say, I want to do litigation. He says, well, I'd like you to write some documents. He says, I don't want to write documents. I want to test them in court. Well, you can't understand how to write a document unless you know what happens when it's tested in court. So it's that barbershop mirror where you have both sides, and then the result is you have a well-rounded student. I think that's what you're getting to.
Absolutely. I mean, we get students that, they just want to be shooting pictures. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be talent. I don't want to write. I just want to be behind the camera. Well, in order to understand what's going on, in order to be able to do your job well, you have to understand that process. And you have to do it in order to understand it. You can't just sit back and go, well, I see he's moving his pen, so I got it. No problem. No, you got to participate and you got to engage. So we get students from all walks of life with all kinds of aspirations. Used to be, most students that would come into a class like this had little experience. But more and more you get students that had it in elementary schools, they did journalism, or they shot movies in high school, or what have you. So we have students at a lot of different levels at a lot of different things that we're doing. So that whole Albert Einstein thing really comes to play here because you have to set the environment. You can't target specific technologies that you're going to teach or specific processes you're going to teach. You have to lay it out, let people run with what they're comfortable with, but then also reinforce where folks are perhaps lacking.
Yeah, the modern education is what it is. But when they come to you, when they come to any of these subsidiary programs, do they want to have a career, or what draws them in? And when it's a multiple compound question, and when they leave, do they have careers? So where does this fit on the career track?
So sometimes people don't know. In general, they're interested, right? And then so we make them, and we take very seriously the credit that they get for doing the work. That's very important. And in industry, it's very important. If you're going out into the field, that you've had a directing credit, that you've done audio, that you've been talent, that matters.
That really looks good on the CV.
That's right. And we have students that come out of our programs that are already working, in part from, for instance, I have a young woman in my Writing for New Media class this semester. I had to start a blog, had to do a website, all as part of this course. They have to have these assets. We have to know their social media and how they network with each other. She was doing a blog that she started here, and out of that, before this semester was finished, her blog had been picked up by a Swedish magazine.
Of course.
So and she wrote to say thank you, say, hey, out of this, I have this gig, and I'm being paid by this magazine. We have students that come out of this that can put their hosting on sizzle reels and have jobs or gigs, coming out of just having the opportunity to get in front of the camera. So it really does matter. I look at this as real work. Nothing annoys me more than, when you hear teachers that say, well, when you start, no, this is real work.
Right now.
Right now, and it matters. And the credits you get, and the work that you do, and the relationships that you make are very real things that contribute to your careers or things you want to do.
Gee, I think that's really important. You know, my way of putting that is it's all on the record. Everything is on the record. You only go around once, and there's one record, your record. Anyway, so can we talk about, you know, this is all sort of in anticipation of a movie or part of a movie we're making for OC16 about the product of this class, I guess in this semester, which is just finishing now, and which Pete and the class gave me, which I'm going to incorporate in an OC16 movie, and it'll be about, you know, Hawaii Pacific news and how it develops, and what about making movies here on 4th Street, really, essentially. So can you tell us about the process by which your students made their movies and film clips in this semester?
Well, the first part of this particular process was letting the students know that this is the expectation, that they're going to, you know, create these products, and don't worry, we will have a process in which you write synopsises, and then you'll write scripts, and then you'll, you know. So the first thing that you do is you think tank, right? And just like a news organization comes in the morning, you throw up all the stories on the board, and you see which ones, you know, take, and you send people out to do them. And you have the stuff you've been working on, but you also have that daily stuff. That doesn't just happen, right? You know, people have to say, okay, yes to this, no to that. And so we'll write down a bunch of ideas. No commitment anywhere, just a bunch of ideas.
This is great. That's a brain session.
It's a brain
wonderful,
session.
Yeah.
And then as we're doing other things, we keep bringing this up. And we say, okay, here we are. And then there's a point where the rubber meets the tarmac. You must commit to a story and a team. And it's all self-organized. I don't tell them what to do. It's their ideas up there, and then they have to choose the ideas that they want to work on.
They think you're so layback, but we know you have a method about the madness.
There's a method. I mean, you know, you got to do the work. I mean, that's the bottom line. And it's hard work, but it's good work if you're doing things that you're interested in. So what I want is for them to be interested, because I know if they're interested and if they commit to something they're interested in, they'll see it through to the end.
Yeah.
If I do the choosing, there's no guarantee, because they can fall off at any time.
Yeah.
That was his.
Yeah.
So they do that, and then they need to get into teams. And they get into segment teams, usually 4 to 5, maybe 6 people in a team, depending on the story. And they need to meet with each other, and they need to come up with the script. They need to schedule when they're going to go out and shoot. They need to decide if you know, they're going to be in front of a green screen or they're going to be out in the field. So they do all of this stuff
This
themselves.
is just like making a movie.
And then there's a series of like exercises. For example, there's a green screen exercise. They got to go shoot something on green screen, shoot something outside, bring it together, screen it for the class. There's an audio exercise, because as we know, audio is usually one of the toughest things. Usually you're very lucky if you get somebody that's interested in audio. That's a godsend on any kind of production. I mean, most people want to be looking.
It seems mundane, but it's really critical, because that's where the message is.
That's right. So they do their audio exercise. And then they're blogging. They're doing at least a blog a week, including comments. Now, this is interesting because it used to be that newspapers were the first draft of history. Now we have something before that. Either these blogs are the first draft of history, and then not all blogs are the same. Some of them are institutional. Some of them are personal. So there's different levels of writing. So we have them doing the personal writing, and I look at that as drafts for things they're interested in, what's bubbling up, what are they, and some of these will take off and they'll mature them into stories. Some of these may become part of the segments or the TV magazine shows that we do. So they're writing all the time. They're sifting through ideas and things in the community.
Great. Well, they learn to take their thoughts and present them.
And we have this, you know, people have to comment and they have to tweet. So there is this network, and people are looking at their stuff. They're looking at their ideas. They're commenting on their ideas. Some of these percolate to the surface, and they take off, and they become more mature products. So we go through that, and then they start shooting, and they start going out and they're shooting. They're doing all of that stuff, and when there's enough assets that have been built up, then we ask them to do a post-production script. Because it's one thing to do a script of what you think something might be, but you go out and interview people, you learn all kinds of things that you would never have known otherwise. You may have had ideas about it, but then you go to somebody in the trenches and it's like, oh my goodness. So once you've collected a fair amount of assets, then you put together a post-production script.
This is the script that the hosts will read.
Well, no, this is the editing script. This is what we're editing. And then once that's done, we're also working with hosts. Because in order to suture all this stuff together, you need somebody to hold it together. So you see 60 Minutes or you see 2020 or Inside Edition, and you have a host, and they're not necessarily out there in the field doing the story. They're setting it up, and then they're throwing to the story that somebody has packaged. So we have them packaging these segments, and then we have them choosing who's going to be the host. It has to come from the class. Who's going to be the host, and then they have to script those hostings, so the intros and the outros. Getting into the show, getting into the first story, getting out of the first story, getting into the second story, getting out of the second story, all the way to the end when they say goodbye. If you want to see anything else, visit us at www.hawaiipacificnews.com.
It's dynamic. You know, from what it looks like at the beginning to what it looks like at the end, it's changed. It's fluidly dynamic.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that you have to be prepared for faux pas, failure, things don't go on right, people not showing up, technical difficulties, all of that. You kind of have to embrace that and say, okay, you know, have the courage to go out there and do the work.
Life lessons. It's not just media. Dr. Pete Britos, Professor of Media, Director of the Media and Cinematic Arts Program at HPU. We're talking about Hawaii Pacific News at HPU here on Think Tech Talks on a given Monday morning. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. You'll see.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Dr. Pete Britos, Professional of Media and Director of the Media and Cinematic Arts Program at Hawaii Pacific University. We're talking about, one of the programs in that program, which is Hawaii Pacific News at HPU. This is Think Tech Talks. And one of the things that came out of our last discussion, last segment, was the thing about the post-asset gathering script. That really fascinates me. So you learn from what you have, you take another look at it. This is such good thinking. It's dynamic thinking. And then you sort of reorganize what the whole movie is going to be about, right? Mm-hmm. So you start out with A, you get the assets, and then you take a fresh look and say, oh, no, that wasn't it. We have to make A+ now. Mm-hmm. And maybe you do that more than once. Huh?
Well, one of the things that comes up is that I don't try and railroad what they want to do. I want them to engage in what they want to do. But that means that we're going to have, 9, 10 different segment projects that are going on. One of the steps is to say, okay, now, what is the shows, what are the magazine shows that we want? What fits well together? So now you got to think about, okay, how do these come together? And usually they're quite disparate topics. But it makes the students think about, okay, how do we suture it together? How do we blend? How do we make this make sense for our audience? And that's going to reconstruct the way that you envision your piece in the first place, because now, for example, you have to think about, okay, this one group of students wanted to feature the brand new iOS 7. And then this other one is doing Race for the Cure. These are kind of, how do you pull it? It makes you think, it makes you stretch, but it's part of the process in putting together a coherent show. So that's part of the rewriting process.
Rewriting. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you before, is writing for this kind of class, or writing for today's media, new media, It's different than writing, when they taught us how to write in school, or certainly in law school.
But when they talk about literary writing, they always say that good writing is rewriting.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, how could you do it on the first try? Impossible.
Yep.
But what are you seeking in terms of the voice? I mean, you want to write something. I'm fresh off writing an article for the paper, and it takes me a while to find the voice, where I find the music, of the language. I'm able to generate copy just sort of spontaneously. That doesn't come right away. You have to think about it and all that. But what are you seeking in terms of the quality of the music there? Is it vernacular? Is it conversational on the street? What is it?
Well, I think it starts with ethics. I mean, it's really where you have to go, because we can break down the writing, for example, into fact-based writing or fictional writing. And sometimes what the students want to do is somewhere in between. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it. They want to do kind of a fictional piece. I'm fine if they want to do a mockumentary kind of piece. I'm fine if they just want to do traditional journalistic fact-based news and information. But they have to be clear about what they're doing. And they have... What
set of rules? Is different sets of rules.
Well, and like I said, it's about morals and ethics at the bottom. Know what you're doing, and then go after it. So good writing will come out of kind of knowing what you see. Because the way I look at it is, there's fiction writing is about truth and ethics as well. Right? There's a way to write that is disingenuous, and then there's a way to write that touches on things that we find are
this
important.
is hard to teach.
It's hard to teach, but not every student wants to do one thing. And this isn't a journalism class where I'm strictly doing fact-based, so I open up the playing field. But they have to choose. Some of the students want to do funnier stuff, but I think if you come from a good ethical place, your writing will follow. At least your teammates and your instructors will be able to help you get where you want to go. But it kind of starts there. Open playing field.
And it's the core. It's the core.
It's the core, and I think that's where, because you use the word, but that's where good comes from, right? Is if you can communicate effectively, if you know what the foundation of your message is. It can be any topic, but to convey it in an appropriate way.
So the idea is that these basic, moves, these basic tasks, these basic rules apply across the board.
It allows you to get to the heart of what you want to communicate.
Yeah. So where are the challenges, Pete? I mean, it's not all perfect. You mentioned sometimes they don't show up, something goes wrong, equipment, who knows what. What are the challenges in terms of getting through and giving you a movie that works?
Well, time, equipment, personnel, but also the categorization and understanding of working within parameters, because it's not just shotgun approach, anything goes. These are very distinct things that we're looking for, and it integrates with a variety of media. For example, the students have to take a producer role on our website. They have to look at the categories on the website: news and information, sports, university living, campus life, technology, entertainment and arts, and they have to take a producer role on one of those categories. So that gets them thinking. And the way that we put it is that you need to take responsibility for a primary producer category and a secondary one. Oh, well, Dr. Britos, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that as you are writing your blogs, as you are thinking about what you're going to be doing for your segments, you need to keep in mind that you're responsible for news and information, or you're responsible for sports. That way, everybody's not writing a sports story, or everybody's not writing about art, but we can spread out this content. So that gets them thinking categorically. Okay, I have this responsibility, but I can do whatever I want. But if I want to get two birds with one stone, then I need to overlap some of these things. So taking care of some of the time issues, taking care of making sure that we're not just going all over the place and not getting anything done. So
Where do they get in trouble? What you mean?
everybody, if people get in trouble, it's usually because they didn't start early enough. They either put it off.
That's so for everything in life.
It's for
don't you
everything.
think?
So, but this is the reason why they come into class, and part of that class may be doing an exercise. Like today, we're in the green screen room, and you guys we're pulling out cameras, we're pulling out lighting equipment, we're setting up the lights, we're setting up the cameras, we're calibrating those cameras, and we're putting people behind that desk, and we're shooting. Now, when you go out of here, what you need to bring back to me with a small team is a green screen project. So I know that they're learning incrementally, and if they're not necessarily learning it for the first time, they're getting better at it. So we're moving towards it. They're having to do work, but still, there's folks that don't jump into the mix early enough. Or
It's
they kinda
largely a
wait.
social experience, isn't it?
It is.
It's a
It is.
group
It is.
collaboration.
And even for the professor, it can be, kind of trepidatious, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know, how the students are going to engage. But there is a process. It's setting the environment. It's setting the conditions so that they can learn from each other, by themselves, and in collaboration with me or you. You come into my class, right, and engage and look at stuff and have this conversation and feedback about what works and what doesn't. But here's my thing. The earlier you can get a draft in, the better the final is going to be. And multiple drafts are good. So I'm happy to see crappy stuff early. I don't want to see crappy stuff late, but bring it in, let's talk about it, just get it done, start collecting your assets, choose a topic early. And but here's something. Over time, we have more examples to show students. So the first students are like, wow, I don't even know if this can be done. But then after that, here are some examples of past students of what they've done. Then it becomes a competition, not just amongst the groups in the class, but also with the past. And not a bad competition to undermine each other, but to see who can do good work. Because it's demonstrated that it can be done. And okay, what can I do that's different? What can I do to push my agenda and my career or my experience forward?
So much of learning is learning from your cohorts, your peers in a group setting and all that, and the psychology and sociology of it. I mean, my favorite moments from my own education were those moments where I was in a group like that. And I think it's hard to do as a teacher, and it sounds like this is a great way to do it. This is a great subject matter to do it in. Dr. Pete Britos, professor of media, director of the Media and Cinematics Arts program at HPU. We're talking about Hawaii Pacific News as one of the projects in that program here on Think Tech Talks. We'll take one last break. We'll be right back. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaiian Foreign Trade Zone, number 9, has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBED, the Hawaii Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program. It does so to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Jay Fidell of Think Tech. Mahalo. Well, we're back. We're live here at Think Tech Talks, Community Matters, with Dr. Pete Britos, Professor of Media and Director of the Media and Cinematic Arts Program at HPU, talking about his class and Hawaii Pacific News, which is one of the programs in his class. And one of the things I wanted to ask him about was, where this crucible of engagement, this crucible of creativity, COC, where you take that in terms of bringing it out of HPU and into the community and touch it, with the movie industry such as it is here in Hawaii.
Well, there's a number of ways we do it, and in this particular class, Writing for New Media, one of the things that we do, we have a really healthy collaboration with the Hawaii International Film Festival. You can go to hpu.hif.org. Our students are given full-on press passes to HIF each year, And
that's worth the price of eggs right there.
yeah, we make them deliver. That's the bottom line, is that they have to do multiple projects, including video projects, to participate. But they have full-on international press passes. They have to step up and play at that level and in that field. A number of good things happen. One, they get to see a lot of international films they wouldn't have otherwise. They get to engage in this social environment that is culturally rich and engaging. And they get to kind of test bed their own ideas about where they want to go and how they want to be involved in the media industry.
Yeah, well, if you're a student of film, and every time you watch a film, you watch it with respect to your own efforts. So watching film is like learning from every piece of film you see. And finding people who make the films is also a reality test. Because you match that person against what your image might be of someone who makes films, and it helps you define your own self.
And one of the cool things about the collaboration is that HIF, over the past couple of years, have started a creative lab program. And our students have been deeply involved with that. For example, we had students involved in the screenwriting lab. And so they went in with industry professionals that they flew in from LA and from other places, and worked on their scripts. In fact, they had to submit scripts in order to get into this. We had a producer's lab, and a bunch of our students were in the producer's lab. And a lot of these students were making films at the time, both in the Writing for New Media class, but also in some of our other creative narrative production courses. We had a broadband lab that our students participated in with folks that are trying to publish to YouTube and other venues. So that's a very important collaboration for us. It gets our students out there. Again, I think if you look at it, the defining line, the foundation of all, is writing. It's getting students to put down their ideas, to put down their thoughts, to put down their projects onto paper, and to be able to present them to others and to discuss and to collaborate on these projects. So there's stuff being done, but we talked about this a little bit earlier. For my money still, the bottom line is that for folks from Hawaii to be engaged in the film or television industry, whether it's fact-based or fiction, we need writers, and we need to mentor writers. We need to encourage writing of all kinds, the vernacular as well as King's English.
This reminds me of an old saw that I have. It's about the Descendants. And I see the Descendants as a watershed movie. Why? Because it took an exclusively Hawaii story and it delivered it to the world. It's a story that people hadn't heard before. It had all kinds of learning points for the guy in Minneapolis. He knew a lot more about Hawaii after he watched The Descendants. And I said to myself, well, we're squandering here, because we have thousands of stories just like that. The melting pot stories, the historical stories, the James Michener come current stories. And we're not really making movies of them. We should.
Part of the problem is that historically there haven't been any movies, say, with Hawaiian or local characters that have been commercially successful. So tough, and historically, film and TV has been difficult to get into because of the expense of getting into it. You needed huge production studios or networks in order to be able to produce this kind of material. So there's all kinds of barriers to entry. I had a student, this was some time ago at the Academy for Creative Media, did a small documentary in one of my classes, and Kaliko is the guy's name. He's a cameraman on Hawaii Five-0 right now, but his story was about his dad and a small group of musicians, including Steve Maii, who is his dad, and Kapono. They had a trio called the Pakalolo Trio that got stuck in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. A small story nobody had ever heard of, but Kaliko went out and did some video and some interviews and put it together. A little rough technically, but it ended up at Sundance. It ended up at the Smithsonian. Gave him a full-on career. So these kinds of stories, there's multiple reasons to be engaged. One, just to tell the story of our community so we can better problem solve for our future. But as well, you go down this path, And if you have the courage, because oftentimes it's thankless for a long time, there are opportunities to have careers. You know, my first television job was on Magnum PI. I was an extra. At the time, I was playing pro racquetball, so I just knew people, and they say, hey, come and do this thing. And I got on set with all these guys, and I was like, man, there's some cool jobs here. But I also knew that I couldn't get any of those jobs, in part because the above-the-line positions, not the below-the-line. Below the line is you're doing the honey wagon, you're doing catering, you're doing transportation, but the above-the-line, the creative positions, they all came from LA.
Yeah, we can't allow that to be the standard solution. We have to get involved in over the line. So what, and to go back to the point about writing, it seems to me that those 1,000 stories, all they have to be, to start it up, is they have to be written. Who better to write them than people who know them right here? I mean, I think in the case of The Descendants, it was a local writer. It was Fred Hemming's daughter. But, there's a lot of people who could write those stories, and that's the beginning. Once you have the stories, you can command, the movies somehow. But question now, we only have a minute left. I want to ask you my bottom line question is, what do we need to do to make this a robust film industry place?
Well, I mean, you've already said it. We really have to encourage the writing. And it's nice that finally, HIF kind of stepped up to the plate, and they have a writing program that they're doing. I know the Maui Film Festival has some kind of writing program that they're doing, but we need it in our schools. And we need to marry the writing with production, because students need to see the process, and they need to have it demonstrated that they can participate. And they can participate at multiple levels. But even our cameramen and our audio people and the folks carrying gear around, they need to participate in the writing side of things. And I think that if we worked hard at doing that some of our writers would come from places that we don't expect. Right now, it's just whoever percolates to the surface and knows they're engaged, maybe have parents who go, oh, you can do that, or what have you. But there's all kinds of folks out there that could do this if they were put in a position where they had to get over whatever the grammatical issues they may have are, and participate in storytelling, right? Which is different than, say, learning English and proper writing. Because like Kaliko's story, it wasn't coming from proper writing, it was coming from a place where production was required at the same time as some kind of script was being formulated. And those things, two things coming together, can be incredibly empowering for a lot of students who don't even know they have the skills.
Why do I feel that the next generation is going to come out of your class, Dr. Pete Britos, professor of media, director of the media and cinematic art program at HPU. I've been talking about Hawaii Pacific News, one of the programs in that course here on Think Tech Talks, Community Matters. Thank you so much. And I didn't know about you being a pro racquetball player, but that's great too.
It was a long time ago. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Pete. Are we done?